This season we meet up with some old friends and make some new ones. I'll take you on adventures through time, visit mysteries and answer questions such as where does Mustafa Khan go next? What happened to John Paul Doherty? Welcome to Telling Tales Season 2, written and presented by me, Jeff Price. This is the last episode of Season 2 of Telling Tales. I hope you enjoy it. I'm taking a break now to write more tales for you. There have been 20 different stories in Seasons 1 and 2. If you've missed any, they are available on my Buzzsprout website. Just use your browser to search for Jeff Price Telling Tales, or look through iPhone podcasts, or check it out on Spotify. Thank you. Jean-Baptiste's breathing was steady. His heart rate was slow. He slowly raised his rifle and steadied the stock on the windowsill. The barrel was eased out of the shutter just enough so he could see clearly through the rifle sight. He leaned forward, adjusted the sight until the image of his prey was sharp and the crosshairs in perfect position for a clear shot. Any moment now the church bell would sound for midday, and he would pull the trigger. There would be no regrets. Everything that was about to happen was deserved. It wasn't him who started this. He'd been fair and reasonable. Too fair and too reasonable, he thought. But now it was time to put a stop to it. He looked at his watch, checked his shot again. It was still clear. The first strike came. He breathed in, held his breath, and as the second chime rang, he squeezed the trigger. 15 years earlier. Good morning, Monsieur Maire. Allow me to introduce myself. I am François Vermont, and this is my wife, Veronique. François held out his hand. A pleasure and welcome to our little village. It's always been good to see new people coming to live here. Tell me, what is it you do? Said Jean-Baptiste, the mayor of Saint-Cécile-de-Paix. I am a sculptor, and Veronique is a landscape painter. We have bought the house and barn across the square from here. Of course you are. More hippies from the north. The Tarn is becoming overrun by them, he thought, but instead said, yes, I've been told we are to have new neighbours. And what brought you here? Veronique tugged François' arms. We loved the light in this part of France, and the house and the barn were a bargain. Although there is much work to do, can you recommend a local builder who could help us? They chatted for a few more minutes, and the mayor promised to give them some names of builders, plumbers, and electricians who could help them. That was many years ago, and despite Jean-Baptiste's reservations, the village had learned to get along with its artists. François' statues were now famous across France, and commissions came from far and wide. Veronique's landscapes were also much in demand. They were the closest thing the village had to celebrities. Saint-Cécile-de-Paix started to attract more artists, writers, and musicians, and they began to buy up the empty properties. A restaurant opened, and the local cafe that had once struggled to find customers was now a thriving business. Tourists came during the summer to admire the pop-up exhibitions, and the yearly Fête des Arts was a huge success. The village had its heart back, and it showed in the flowers that hung from the street lamps, the manicured displays across the village square, and the old wine barrels filled with flowers that lined the road into the village. It was why the village had won the Tarn best-kept village competition for the last 4 years. It had been the crowning glory of Jean-Baptiste's 10 years the village mayor. It had made him the envy of every mayor for 100 kilometres. And so it would have continued but for François the sculptor. They'd forgiven his drunken ways, and even the music that blasted out from his workshop was tolerated, as long as it didn't continue too late into the night. But the statue, the mayor thought, was a step too far. The first he'd heard about it was when Jean-Paul, the village caretaker, came breathlessly into the mairie and told him there was a naked woman in the garden of François the sculptor. Jean-Paul had been watering the flowers around the border of the village square in preparation for the visit of the judges from the best-kept village competition. He had trimmed the grass. He had admonished the old gentleman who ran the boulangerie for leaving his baking trays outside his shop. He was the mayor's eyes and ears. His was the reflected glory of the annual beautiful village competition. "It's 2 meters tall and naked as a newborn child," he continued. His wiry face, normally as inscrutable as a nun at prayer, was flushed and distorted in rage. "If the judges see that, we can kiss goodbye to winning the competition. It's pornographic," he spluttered. "Right," Jean-Baptiste said. "I've had enough of that bloody sculptor and his hippie friends infecting this village with their so-called art. It's time to put a stop to it." A pair of them ran across the square and stared through the gates of François's house. And there, in the middle of the garden, for all the world to see, was the statue. The mayor pushed open the gate and strode across to François's workshop. First he was conciliatory. "François, this is a fine statue you have made, but it's not appropriate to be seen from the square. Can you please move it where it can't be seen?" François looked bemused. "This is my gift to the village. I'll only move it if it can stand in the centre of the village square. It is my tribute to my Veronique." "Over my dead body," the mayor replied. "Look, we were all sorry to hear of her passing, and the village all turned out for her funeral, and that is enough. But it is my masterpiece. It has taken me 6 months to make." Jean-Baptiste was becoming more and more angry. "This is not your wife. She was no bigger than a 10-year-old child. And she was old. Move it now. Soon we will have the judges coming for the best-kept village competition, and I don't want them to see that monstrosity." François continued. "The village competition means nothing to me. I am an artist. This is how she appeared to me. She is my life, my soulmate, and a great artist in her own right. Get out and leave me alone." François pushed them out of his garden and closed the gates. By this time a small crowd had gathered, all wanting to know what was going on. The old women blushed and pointed. The young children giggled, and the young men admired the fine shape of the goddess that stood before them. Her legs were shapely and strong, her arms held wide open as if to embrace the old sculptor, her face confident and smiling, as if the world was full of promise. François looked up at the statue of his wife and said, "Don't worry, my dear. They're making a mountain out of a molehill. It will all blow over in a day or two." But it didn't. In 2 weeks' time, the judges would arrive, and there would be a new champion by that weekend. And Jean-Baptiste, the mayor, realized he'd be laughed at from one end of the Tarn Garonne to the other, and he had to do something. In the courtyard of the house of François the sculptor, the shadowed head of the statue had exploded into 1,000 pieces, and François ran into the garden and dropped to his knees, and he began to pick up the shattered pieces of the statue. Tears ran down his face, and then he screamed in anger so loudly that soon villagers gathered. René, the cafe owner, was the first to arrive. "François, my friend, what has happened? Are you okay?" François struggled to his feet. "There was a shot, and then an explosion, and look." And he pointed to a shattered window of the house. "I was in there having lunch. I could have been killed. What sort of lunatic does something like this?" It wasn't difficult to work out who the lunatic was, and soon the gendarmes arrested Jean-Baptiste. The villagers who previously been divided about the statue were now united in their support of François, and by a unanimous vote of the village committee, the headless statue was moved to the floral display at the centre of the square. François even gave a speech when it was installed. "My friends, thank you for allowing me to erect this statue. Veronique was my muse and a great artist in her own right. Her work hangs in the most prestigious galleries in France. I have been asked many times if I could repair the statue, but I know Veronique would have not wanted that. Its lack of a head has become part of the narrative of its creation, a symbol of the struggle of art to be accepted. This terrible attack has brought us all together, and the statue now not only honors Veronique, but it honors you, the people of Saint-Cécile-de-Paix, who have stood beside me, and this is my gift to thank you all." And there it stands to this day, a must-see tourist attraction of the Tarn and Garonne. A plaque on the wall in French of the mairie reads, and I translate here: "The statue of the headless woman was created by the sculptor François Vermont to honor his dear departed wife Veronique Vermont, the famous landscape artist. It was decapitated by Jean-Baptiste, a former mayor of the village, and now stands as a symbol of defiance for all those who would deny France her artistic culture and her tradition of tolerance." If you enjoyed this episode, then please support my podcast by buying me a coffee. Click the heart logo in the top corner of the website page and donate. If you're on another podcast provider, then check out buymeacoffee.com and search for Jeff Price N3. Thank you. You can contact Telling Tales direct by emailing tellingtalesjeffprice@gmail.com. Until the next time, goodbye.